All right. Well, welcome everyone. It is the top of the hour on the nose, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Partial County Alerting webinar. Please do make sure that you're muted and your cameras are turned off during the presentation today. So I'm Denise Balukas from the Office of the Chief Learning Officer, and I have had the pleasure of working with Tim and the team to put this webinar together for you today. Today's webinar will cover the existing use of Partial County Alerting, PCA, improvements on the way, and then also future steps for interested WFOs. Before we get started, I would like to take just a few moments and introduce today's speakers. The lead on this project is Tim Schott for the webinar. He's a meteorologist and AFS Dissemination Services lead with a particular focus on NOAA Weather Radio and moving Partial County Alerting into National Weather Service operations. Adrienne Abbott is the Nevada State Emergency Communications Committee Chair. She's considered an expert on emergency alert system. She's served on EAS committees for the FCC, the National Association of Broadcasters, and the California SECC. Dan Burke has served as the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the Las Vegas, Nevada office since 2012. Ken Drews is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the Tucson, Arizona WFO. Susan Sanders is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the Rapid City, South Dakota FO. Brian Garcia is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at WFO Monterey Bay Area, and he is joined by Sam Wallace, the Alert and Warning Program Manager for the County of Sonoma. Craig Hoden is the Dissemination Services Branch Chief under the NOAA Weather Radio Program Manager under the Office of Dissemination. Ashley Kells is an AWIP Project Manager for the Office of Central Processing. One of the projects that he manages is Hazard Services. And then Daryl Kingfield is the Hazard Services Program Manager at NOAA's Global Systems Laboratory. Now, you may notice Daryl couldn't be here today. He's actually in Taiwan right now where the local time is 3 a.m. So rather than wake Daryl up in the middle of the night, we had him record his part of the webinar, and we will present that today during the webinar as if he were here. If you have questions about Daryl's presentation, type them into the chat. If our group that's present today can't answer them, then we will absolutely make sure that Daryl sees those. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get the webinar started. And Tim, if you could take it away.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Denise. And the question may be on your mind on what is partial county alerting. Next slide. When we say partial county alerting or PCA, we are specifically referring to alerting over NOAA Weather Radio and the Emergency Alert System. Next. PCA provides more geographically precise weather alerts. As you saw from the previous graphic developed by our WFOs and the Office of Communications team, the notional county was broken into 3 pieces or partitions. Next. So how does PCA, if we could go back one. So how does PCA improve information delivery? PCA employs the use of specific area message encoding location codes with a non-zero first digit. To realize the full benefits of PCA, NWR listeners must use same-equipped receivers. Because same location codes are identical to EAS location codes, many broadcasters will have the capability to target their delivery of EAS messages. In addition, EAS crawls and audio will specify county partition names instead of whole county names. Note that same receivers with the Public Alert logo and broadcasters' EAS encoder-decoder equipment require these devices to process and use partial county location codes. Users only need to make simple location code changes. Which counties might benefit from PCA? This capability may be appropriate for geographically large counties. PCA may also be helpful for counties with distinct population centers or unique shapes, such as panhandles and counties which are elongated latitudinally or longitudinally. What is happening beginning in 2023? Many of you have heard a few offices have successfully used PCA since the early 2000s. And today you will hear from Susan and Ken. You will also hear from Dan at our newest office to join the PCA effort. These offices have been using local partial county applications. What is changing is that PCA is moving into AWIPS and will include a number of dissemination enhancements, which you will hear about from Daryl and Ashley. PCA will expand to include non-weather emergency messages, and you will learn more on this from Brian. The initial PCA implementation, potentially in 2023, would be through an AWIPS test authorization node. However, in 2024, PCA is scheduled to be included in an AWIPS build. There are two key points we would like you to take away from today's webinar. The first is that PCA is one available tool to mitigate the geographical overreach of warning dissemination via NWR and EAS. But PCA is not appropriate for every WFO or every county. The second is that the implementation of PCA for a county requires advanced planning and coordination. If offices have been thinking about whether PCA might be useful for one of their counties, 2023 is a great time to begin early conversations with external partners, such as broadcasters, emergency managers, local officials, and your state and local communications committees. Let's now hear the great success story from Dan Burke and Adrian Abbott and the implementation of PCA for Clark County, Nevada last year.
Thank you very much, Tim. So let me get started with Adrian Abbott and Dan Burke.
Next slide, please. Welcome to Nevada. Yes, we are close to Las Vegas. Actually, California is to our west, Utah to our east, Arizona to the south, Oregon and Idaho to our north. Keep in mind, it takes 10 hours to cross this state from east to west. It's 8 hours to travel between Reno, the southern tip of Las Vegas, of Washoe County, all the way to Las Vegas in the middle of Clark County. With the Sierra and Death Valley to the west, Clark County, again down there at the southern end of the state, is subject to extreme weather conditions. During the summer monsoon, sudden thunderstorms can drop inches of rain, which will run off the dry desert soil and flood communities in foot-deep water. People, cars, even a fire truck have been washed away in these flood events. Next. Most of the 2.2 million people who live in Clark County actually live in the Las Vegas Valley, which we have circled there. You can see how the highways kind of crisscross the state. Signals from most of our broadcasters cover the valley, but not the county, not the entire county. No one broadcast signal reaches from Laughlin all the way down at the bottom there to Indian Springs at the north or Mesquite to the east. Broadcasters, however, in spite of this, were expected to carry EAS activations issued for conditions which threatened any area in this huge county. Las Vegas stations were receiving activations for Indian Springs or Laughlin outside the population area, outside their broadcast audience. This led to multiple messages for weather conditions which did not affect the broadcaster's audience. Next. The answer was obvious: issue warnings for only the affected areas. The FCC provided the idea of subdividing counties when they began EAS back in 1995. I shopped the idea to our broadcasters, who were a little skeptical after being pounded with so many activations, but they were willing to do anything to avoid an afternoon of where an Amber Alert was buried by 11 EAS activations for weather warnings issued in a 3-hour period. For this reason, I urged WFOs to work with broadcasters, particularly the EAS State Emergency Communications Committee, if those people haven't already come to you first, to let them know that PCA is a program which could be a welcome addition to their EAS programming. Dan can explain a little bit further about our process with this. Dan?
Next slide, please. So, is partitioning a county correct for you and your counties? Next, please. So, what problem are you trying to solve by partitioning? There should be a reason to do it. In our case, it was we had a lot of perceived overwarning because we have a huge county here. It's 8,000 square miles, and there are 6 states that are smaller in the east. They're smaller than our county here in Clark County, where Las Vegas is. So it was a problem before we went to polygon warnings, because we could have a storm anywhere in the county and the entire county was alerted for it. When we went to polygons, we thought, hey, great. Polygons are going to allow us to target the threat area much better. However, EAS never took that into account. So if you're getting your warnings through any other source where we couldn't see the polygon, you didn't know where the warning was really for. And the second problem we ran into is, now that we're issuing polygons, we might have 5 thunderstorms that are warned on in the county. So now you're getting 5 EAS activations, and none of them might be in the Las Vegas Valley, where 90% of the people in the county are. So that erodes public trust. So many times getting an EAS alert when there's nothing going on above their head to warrant any kind of a weather warning. So, and we also get a lot of complaints due to this. Why are you issuing warnings when there's nothing going on? When I can tell them, hey guys, we're getting insane flooding going on in a part of the county, just not your part of the county. Next, please. So some of the things you need to consider when thinking about your county and whether it should be partitioned are, the county characteristics. Large counties might qualify for that, like that's what we deal with here, or elongated, oddly shaped counties like Washoe County or Nye County here, as an example in Nevada. Some of them, they're pretty large, but they're also very long, and the weather in the southern part of the county isn't necessarily the same as the weather in the northern part of the county. Geographically separated, like if you have, think Key West CWA, they have a bunch of islands. Maybe we don't need to warn every island for something that's going on only one. Urban versus rural. In Clark County, Las Vegas is in the center of the county, which is the vast majority of the population. Washoe County in the far northwest of Nevada is also in that boat. Reno is in the southern tip of the county. The vast majority of the folks that live in Washoe County are all in that very southern portion of the county. So these are things that, you might want to consider when considering partitioning. Also consider, in the case of large counties like we have out here, and I'll show you this in the slide coming up, we have multiple NWR transmitters that are serving a county, and even they don't cover the whole county. That might be something you factor in too. And your partners. For example, we have a request to partition Mojave County in northwest Arizona because they use the EAS to trigger signs to light up at low water crossings so people will know that there's a warning in the area. But it's another one of these very large and geographically oblong north to south. So they would like to be able to only light up those signs for the portion of the county where the warning's in effect. So we have there's a lot to unpack when considering partial county alerting for a county in your area. Next, please. How did we establish boundaries in Clark County? It's an iterative process. Your first map is certainly not going to be your last. And when it's important to work with your broadcasters and partners, but first understand the system you're dealing with. Next, please. So these are some guidelines the FCC has already in there for partitioning. Our same codes, our same location codes, are six digits codes based on the original FIPS codes, which have your state and your county codes. In this case, for Clark County, our state code in Nevada is 32 and Clark County is 003. But the lead number that we work with in general is always a 0. That's for the entire county. But when you partition, you can use any of the digits 1 through 9. And what you're seeing in the lower part of this graphic is how they are designed. Now this is coded. If you have a number 1, that leading digit, it's going to be called the Northwest, like Northwest Clark County. You don't need to use all 9, as you'll see in our partitions. You could use as few as 2 or as many as 9, just whatever works best for the county that you're dealing with. Next, please. Now, as part of our iterative process, on the left was one of our early attempts at creating a map, and on the right is a second one. We thought we had technical difficulties with the oblong, with the odd shapes of the Colorado River there, but it turns out that wasn't a big deal. So we went to, next please. What we finally came up with was this: 6 partitions that seemed to work for us. 90% of the population is all in that central partition, that partition 5. We elected to avoid common knowledge things like Interstate 15. That was the thought. Well, why don't we just have it go along Interstate 15? The reasoning against that was, well, if we have it going right along the highway and we wanted to warn for effects on the highway, we would have to activate 2 polygons, which is kind of defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do in the first place. So we elected to avoid, things like that. There are other things that you're going to consider when you're developing your own polygons, and your situation will absolutely be unique. It won't look like ours or anyone else's, and you'll just have to work that out best with your partners and certainly your broadcasters. And also leverage your local GIS capability. Most offices have someone who is at least capable in GIS. I was able to build these maps. I have some minimal GIS training, so it doesn't take someone who's an absolute GIS expert to create the maps. But if you have some issues with that, you can find someone in another office who can help you out with that. Even I can help you out with that. Next, please. This is a map of our NWR transmitter coverage. As you can see, we have 5 transmitters that have a reach into our county, but they don't even cover the whole county. So these are things we have to consider when we do this. Now, in theory, we're broadcasting our EAS message. Our broadcasters are listening to one of these transmitters, and then they retransmit it to a much larger area. It's a totally separate area of coverage. Next, please. As you'll see in this example, here are 2 of our lower wattage stations, radio stations. Now, if you have a 50,000 watt station broadcasting right out of Las Vegas, one of the mountains near Las Vegas, it's covering the entire county. They're going to be sending through all of our partitions, any of the warnings. But most of our broadcasters are operating on a lower wattage. And here's an example where we have a station KJUL up in the northeastern portion of the county and KCNB, which is the far western portion of the county. Now, if we have a storm, as we often do, have really nasty flooding going on in that northeast part of the county, KCNB doesn't have to, they can elect to not put forth partition 3 warnings. So all of the Las Vegas Valley doesn't have to be warned for one storm that's up in the northeastern portion of the county. And we don't have to activate EAS, which doesn't activate all of the radio station or necessarily the TV station. And the broadcasters are able to choose based on their coverage area who they will alert for, which partitions they'll alert for, which helps us reduce that perceived overwarning, because that's, while KJUL is going to run a warning from up in their area in like Mesquite, Nevada, but the Las Vegas Valley doesn't necessarily have to be alerted for that. That's 2 million people who aren't getting an unnecessary EAS activation. Cable services, they are also one of our stakeholders in this. They have a whole different kind of animal. The cable company that covers Las Vegas proper does have will be activating for the whole county. However, we have a totally separate cable operator up in Mesquite, which now will only have to activate. They don't have any customers outside of that partition 3 in the northeast portion of the county. Next, please. So you've worked with your partners, you decided to partition a county. What do you do next? Well, you develop your preliminary partitions, and then you work with your partners to hone that. And once you've done that, we went with a public comment period. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it's certainly a good idea. We went with, I think, a 60-day public comment period, and we got all sorts of great feedback for that. Service change notice, which is pretty standard anytime you're doing something like this, something big that's going to change what we're providing. And we also went forth with an education and awareness campaign. We did separate webinars and meetings with both our broadcasters and our partner broadcasters and partners and the public. With the public, it was more social media campaign. We went with a social media campaign. It's, you know, we have a web page. We set up a web page, and we had we created a video, which we'll show you a little later at the end of the presentations. And we created the video. We created it. We also did a two-pager, one or two-pager, we can call it. Can you click to the next, please? This is an example of our SCN, I believe. Yeah, this is the SCN we put out just prior to the activation on June 1st, 2021. Next, please. This is our website. As with most National Weather Service websites, it's you know, somewhat lacking, but it's very, very functional. It has tons and tons of information and lots of links in the northeast, top left, right corner, and that will those give you lots of information associated with it. There's also a national PCA webpage which links to this, and that will also link to some of the other offices that have kind of led the charge about 15 years ago. Next, please. This is just a screenshot of our video that you're going to see a little later. Next. And this is our two-pager that we had. There's a new one-pager that's more recent than this, but I just wanted to, and you can we can share this with the partner. It's also linked on the webpage. The partners can learn a lot more about what partial county alerting is, and you can use it to, if you're interested, because you think there's a problem, you can bring this to them and say, hey, this is how we can improve the EAS alerting for your area. This is an old version, but I just use this as an example because it's Clark County centric. The new one is kind of generic, but it's the same information. It's great information. Next, please. All right. We make sure you're working with your broadcasters. Know your SECC, LECC, know your chairs, and they're your best source for broadcaster knowledge. I'm going to turn it back over to Adrienne right now to talk a little bit about what kind of changes are needed within the state and local EAS plans that she so fantastically did for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. We really were fortunate in that this partial county alerting project occurred at a time when we were already rewriting our state plan. So it was simple to incorporate. And of course, the FCC requires that you update your plan every year. So we were able to fit that in, produce a product, and then as changes are made, or if anything is changed with PCA, or we add another county, for example, you saw how large Nye County was, we just will incorporate that in the next version of our EAS plan. So it was a very simple project for us as broadcasters and the EAS committee. And again, I would urge everybody to be in touch with their EAS committee, their state chairs. If you need to know who your state chair is, you can contact me, but chances are pretty good you're probably already talking with your EAS people. And that makes the biggest difference in this entire project. So Denise, over to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian and Dan. And next we have Ken Cruz.
Thanks, Denise. And thanks to Tim, Adrian, and Dan for the very comprehensive explanation of partial county alerting. PCA was implemented at WFO Tucson prior to my arrival here in 2008. So if you share a county with one or more neighboring WFOs, you may, that may be another reason that you want to employ partial county alerting. This is especially helpful, as Dan mentioned, if that county spreads across more than one traditional media coverage area. Next slide. In Arizona, Pinal County is shared between WFOs Phoenix and Tucson. That's shown there in the yellow box there between the pink and green areas of our CWAs. Next. Zooming in, you can see that Pinal County is located right between Phoenix and Tucson, both of which have their own traditional media broadcast areas. And the blue line on this map then shows that dividing line again between the CWAs. Next. Another consideration is the NOAA weather radio coverage areas. There are 2 NWR transmitters in the Phoenix CWA and 1 in the Tucson CWA that all broadcast into Pinal County. While not shown here, there's actually another transmitter in the Flagstaff CWA that also reaches into Pinal County. Next slide. So just digging a little deeper here, here's the Tucson transmitter or NWR transmitter coverage area shown here. You see we have okay coverage in the southeast Pinal County, not that great elsewhere in the county. Next slide. On this slide, we're seeing the coverage areas of the Phoenix NWR transmitters. You can see the overlap into Pinal County, into southeast Pinal County even, part of it, but they definitely cover the northwest part of Pinal County better. So that brings into considerations on how you want to divvy up those sections of the county. But certainly, next slide. Within, for our sakes, currently, we really have the dividing line between the 2 CWAs, where there could be further divisions coming forward in the future. But for now, this really just shows the dividing lines for Pinal County right now. If you wish to implement partial county alerting for a county that is shared by more than one WFO, please note that all the WFOs need to implement PCA for this to work within the baseline AWIP software. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Next is Susan Sanders.
Shortly after the National Weather Service implemented specific area message encoding on NOAA Weather Radio in 1998, we decided to use partial county alerting for Pennington County, South Dakota for 3 reasons. First, the county is extremely large, 100 miles across from west to east, so storms that affect one part of the county don't always affect another part. Next. We didn't need all 9 possible divisions. We divided the county into 3 partitions based on terrain and climatology, so they're not equal sizes. Next. The terrain varies from the heavily forested Black Hills, which includes Mount Rushmore, where several mountains are over 7,000 feet MSL. Next. To the prairies that include the Badlands. The weather conditions vary just as much. Next. Finally, about 2/3 of the population lives in and around Rapid City, so the Central Pennington County partition includes the metropolitan area. Dividing the county drastically reduces the number of warnings people receive on NOAA Weather Radio and cable TV systems that don't serve the outlying areas. Our broadcast areas, radio and TV stations have very large coverage areas, so they relay warnings for all 3 partitions. We also have weather radio stations that cover just the western and eastern sections of the county, so those stations don't go into the exclusive alert broadcast suite for storms 100 miles away. Next. This slide shows the benefits of PCA. A tornadic storm developed over the western part of the county and moved southeast, so it remained over the Black Hills. The polygon drawn in Warren Gen was only in West Pennington County, which prevented the warning from alerting Rapid City residents who were not in danger from the storm. Next. Our office has only partitioned large counties with other characteristics such as an odd shape, terrain, climatological variations, or population centers. Hardin County is an example of a very large, almost square county with none of those other factors. It has almost no characteristics by which to define the partitions for people to program their weather radios. Most people know each other, so if somebody hears a warning for a storm that will affect a friend or family member, they're likely to call to let them know. They have no local media. All the radio and TV stations come from Montana, North Dakota, and other parts of South Dakota. Their population is spread out, and the county seat of Buffalo is only a quarter of the entire population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And next up are Brian and Sam.
All right. Hey, good day, everybody. Brian Garcia, Warning Coordination Meteorologist, National Weather Service, San Francisco Bay Area and Monterey Bay regions. It's my distinct pleasure and honor to have my friend and colleague, Sam Wallace, Sonoma County Alert and Warning Program Manager with us. And Sam, I'll turn it over to you for the first 3 slides here.
Well, thank you, Brian. So as Brian mentioned, I'm the Alert and Warning Manager for Sonoma County. If you'd followed the news about 5 years ago, we had a absolutely devastating wildfire, the 2017 Nuns Tubbs fire, and it moved incredibly rapidly in a way that we'd never seen before. And as you can see on the slide, in one night, basically, we lost over 5,000 homes and 22 lives. And that was just one of many fires that were actually happening that night. Now, in addition to just this massive wildfire that was moving, it was having a secondary effect of knocking out power lines that were actually in the fire area. Cell phone communication was going down. Telephone communication was going down. And all of this was happening after about 11 p.m. at night. So as you can imagine, with our inability to do alerting at that point, it just added to the confusion and the chaos. Now, the good news that came out of that when we were picking up the pieces afterwards is we did realize that the National Weather Radio Tower never did actually lose its ability to do transmissions while that was going on. So as we looked to figure out how could we do better for the next time, we went ahead and started pushing the National Weather Radio as an alerting device for non-weather emergency messaging and developed our own primitive protocols to do that. Next slide, please. Now, we considered the Nuns Tubbs fire to be a once-in-a-100-year fire. So much to our surprise, 2 years later, we had a second once-in-a-100-year fire, the Kincaid fire, which is actually larger in scope, but thankfully less damaging, less destructive, and we had no deaths in it. And one of the things we did is we had a much more robust alert and warning system. And as part of that, we did use the NOAA Weather Radio as a signaling device, which was especially important for our more rural areas and even our agricultural areas that don't have good cell coverage even on a good day. So it worked. We were able to work with Brian's team. It wasn't as swift and efficient, but it was a good learning process for us. The next slide, please. Now, since then, we've really gone in whole hog with the NOAA weather radios. We've distributed over 16,000 units to underprivileged residents to make sure they have it. And of course, one of the difficulties we have is the NOAA weather radio could only communicate with the entire county or none at all. And we have a fairly large county. It's 1,700 square miles. But a lot of our population centers are very remote from our more rural and even wildland areas. So as you can see from this one, and this is a better map of the Kincaid fire that shows our mandatory evacuation area, but we also had a huge area that was under a evacuation warning, and the ability to isolate the communication to those specific areas affected us significantly. We had well over 100,000 people that were under one form of evacuation order or another at the same time. So that's kind of the picture of what was going on in Sonoma County and why we have opted to do partial county alerting. I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Sam. Next slide, please. So as part of that, I've worked with Sam. Our office has worked with Sam in the great county of Sonoma, and to divide up that really odd-shaped county you're seeing there on the left. And so you can see all the same codes that we're going to go with. Typically, same codes start with 0, but now we're going with partial county, like Dan showed early on, with all the leading single digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. Reasoning is because we wanted a multifaceted alerting protocol, which is dependent upon situation. And it's also to limit over alerting. So if we're trying to alert one spot in the county up north, it's not going to alert everybody down in the south. We initially started with the sheriff's patrol zones from SAM. Then we took into topography. We took into account the PRISM data, so the rainfall data. And we took into account historical flash flood warnings for Sonoma County. And that really helped us define these zones. Process began pre-pandemic. And then it got stalled a little bit. And so we're hoping to implement with the ATAN, the AWIPS technical authorization note early next year, by the middle of next year sometime, so that we can be ready for fire season of 23 for Sonoma County. And it's all based around non-weather emergency messages in support of our partners in Sonoma County. And that's it. Back to you, Denise.
Thank you both very much. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Sam. And next, we will have Tim and Craig.
Sure, next slide, please. So our external PCA program communications are now supported at the national level with a web page built and maintained by comms. And it's a real easy URL. It is weather.gov/PCA. Next slide. Additionally, we work with comms and our WFOs to create a new fact sheet. Between the web page and the fact sheet, these resources can be leveraged by offices to help explain PCA to interested partners and the public. Next. So know that AFS is here to assist interested offices from concept exploration through county deployment. We can facilitate conversations between CP and DIS. We suggest that offices conduct their own public comment periods to further socialize the concept. This is easy to do. You can leverage the PCA descriptions on the National PCA and National NWR pages. And if asked, we're happy to participate in conversations with your broadcasters, EMs, and state emergency communications committees with folks like Sam and Adrian. Craig will now provide additional information from the Office of Dissemination.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Office of Dissemination provides national support and assistance to local forecast offices for PCA. We can provide mapping support for AWIPS use as well as for your local web presentations. We also operate the national NWR web pages where we have information for implementation. We have resources for operations and also reference. Next slide, please. So the mapping support for AWIPS and the web resources would be the actual NWR transmitter propagation plots that are overlaid on a geographic map showing the partial county implementation that you would incorporate. Here we have the Clark County image shown that we provide on the national webpage. I'll note that the partial county descriptors are actually in the little table at the bottom of the graphic where it designates whether it's the east, northwest, so forth of the partial county sector. And the other AWIPS shape files can be provided, for use in the AWIPS system as well. Next slide. The national web pages also provide a general description on the on partial county alerting, kind of the sample partition county patterns that can be established just for general use for implementation, figuring out what makes sense for your specific need. Next slide, please. For the operations, once you have implemented a partial county designation, we publish in our lookup tables the county listings, the actual same code that's designated for the partial counties, as you see here, done for Clark County, Meade County, Pennington, and Cochise County. Next slide, please. So the national web pages also provide the list of offices that have implemented partial county alerting, and then we provide links, as was mentioned earlier, to your local pages for the public to gain access to specific information. And then we also do have some general Q&A information on receiver programming. Of course, the public will have to go to the specific receiver instructions to actually incorporate the partial county coding in their specific receivers. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you very much, Craig. And so next we are going to present, let's hope that it's working. Next we're going to present Daryl's recorded presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and we will make sure that he gets them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daryl Kingfield, and I am the Hazard Services Program Manager at NOAA's Global Systems Laboratory. And unfortunately, I was double booked for this webinar with a NOAA meeting in Taiwan. I didn't think you'd want to hear my voice at 3 a.m. local time, so I'm here in this video to show you how easy it is for partial county alerting to be part of your watch, warning, or advisory decision-making process using the Hazard Services software inside your Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System, or AWIPS. Geographical information in AWIPS, such as forecast zones for long-duration hazards and counties for more short-fused hazards, are managed at the national level through individual shapefiles that are updated twice a year, usually in the spring and fall. Once the boundaries of a county that opts in to use the PCA service is finalized, the county shapefile will be updated to support these new partitioned areas. Now, in preparation for PCA, the county shapefile is getting new metadata fields to help distinguish between different parts of the county using PCA and other non-PCA counties, as shown in some examples on the next slide. So how do non-PCA and PCA counties look inside the county table within the AWIPS database? For a non-PCA county, there will continue to be a single row representing the entire county area, as shown here for Adams County, Colorado. For a PCA county, such as Clark County, Nevada, there will be a unique row for each fraction of the county, as decided during the PCA division process. Now, much of the metadata is the same across each county partition as shown in the green area. However, two new columns do provide distinguishing parameters to support watch, warning, and advisory product generation in AWIPS. First is the area_same column shown in orange, which provides a unique non-zero leading digit to support the specific area message encoding or same text creation. Second is the area_name column as shown in purple, which provides a cardinal direction descriptor used in various parts of the product text. With these county modifications made in the AWIPS database, loading up the county layer from the Maps drop-down menu will render each partial county area individually. On the left is how Clark County, Nevada looks in CAVE today, and on the right is an example of how Clark County could look with PCA implemented. Not only does this provide some geospatial awareness of where your PCA boundaries are located, but these individual areas will be selectable within the Hazard Services framework, as shown on the slides ahead. Hazard Services will eventually be the unified piece of software to issue all watch, warning, and advisory products, and we've made activation of partial county alerting for your office easy. It's a one-line change to a Python file that can be performed as an override within the CAVE localization perspective, so the transition can occur at any time, even between AWIPS releases. Whenever you're ready to go, Hazard Services will also be ready to go. On the next several slides, we will show some examples of how products will look when they include a county that was subdivided under the PCA paradigm. Now, in this first scenario, let's imagine that you've issued a flash flood warning for the northwest portion of Clark County that overlaps with 3 of the 6 total partial county areas. In this example, and with any polygon that only includes a subset of the total number of partial county areas, there are 3 unique product elements that will be organized and managed under the hood within Hazard Services. First, a partition tag will be added to the end of the product to explicitly list out the parts of the county area in the warning. These numbers come from the area_same column in the county table referenced on an earlier slide. Any bullets that reference geographical locations will also reference the directional parts of the county as shown here. These directions come from the area_name entries within that county table. Finally, Hazard Services will eventually produce Common Alerting Protocol or CAP messages and will reference each individual partial county region with a unique specific area message encoding tag block as shown here. In the second scenario, let's imagine that you've issued a flash flood warning for the entire Clark County region. In this case, no partition tag will be written because all partial areas are included within this warning. In addition, any location bullets will only reference the county name with no cardinal directions. Finally, there will only be one specific area message encoding tag block for the entire county within the CAT message. The examples on the previous slide show hazard events being created using the polygon drawing tools, but Hazard Services also allows for map layers to be used to create new hazard events. Using the Maps for Select by Area tool within the Hazard Services console and choosing the County Boundaries layer, you can highlight individual PCA areas with a left click of the mouse, as shown here with the northeastern and eastern portions of Clark County selected. Then you can create a new hazard event with a right click of the mouse. This could be the preferred approach if you wanted to relay time-sensitive information to a specific portion of a county and you did not want to use the polygon drawing tools. So to summarize what I discussed here, your PCA changes will be included as part of an AWIPS County shapefile update and will be ingested into the AWIPS2 database. Activating PCA in Hazard Services is easy and can occur at any time, even between AWIPS releases. And once activated, Hazard Services under the hood will be able to distinguish between non-PCA and PCA counties to produce text and CAP formatted products depending on the area of interest covered by the hazard polygon. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. And Ashley, you will be our last speaker, and let me make sure that I am advancing.
Hello, everyone.
No, there we go. Okay. Ashley, take it away.
All right, Denise. Yeah. Hazard Services version 4 migrates the full WarnGen functionality. As you can see there is a list of the hazards for that release. Please note that the MWS and the Marine Weather Statement and the Aviation Weather Warning will not be conveyed via No Weather Radio or EAS using partial county alerting. Next. Partial county alerting, of course, affects and will impact all polygon-based hazards in partial county or for partial county alerting. I showed you the previous slide showed the remaining WarnGen hazards, but here are the hydro-related hazards that came with the Hydro IOC, and these will also be impacted. Next slide, please. All right. As you've heard other people mention, an ATAN is an AWIPS test authorization node. It's basically a configuration management method to deploy AWIPS software ahead of schedule for testing purposes. The Office of Central Processing plans on releasing an ATAN for the convective workflows and the partial county alerting. It contains two pieces of software, Hazard Services with the convective workflows, and also an NWR Waves update to read the WMO text product partition tag that Daryl referenced in his video. Next slide, please. All right, the site expectations. There's going to be some site IT requirements, basically the ITO and Hazard Services focal point, which of course would be to follow the ATAN instructions. To take the Hazard Services focal point training for the convective hazards and partial county workflows, customize Hazard Services to match their WarnGen configurations. The forecaster requirements is to take the forecaster training for the convective workflows and partial county alerting functionality, and to test that convective workflows and partial county alerting workflows in practice mode. And we're expecting that to be done before any site would go into operations. The local office team, also the before that even, the Hazard Services Tiger team will review the results of that testing to help determine whether we are ready to use Hazard Services in an operational environment. And then each office, the local office team, will agree to begin the testing of the convective workflows and partial county alerting in their specific operations. Next slide, please. All right. The ATAN will be based on AWIPS 21.4.1. So you must have 21.4.1 installed to be able to use the ATAN. We're currently in operational beta and expected to continue for that to be the case until March of 2023, with deployment taking place from April through July. So we're expecting the ATAN timeline is a deployment in the Aprilish timeframe, and I've kind of put together other timelines related to the different site expectations. And really operational usage would probably come in the June 2023 timeframe and beyond, depending on each site. Next slide, please. All right. And then for the national deployment, the Hazard Services version 4, we've got a check-in coming in this summer, and then regional and operational beta testing in the spring of 2024, deployment in the summer of 2024, and then implementation basically for the partial county alerting will be September of 2024 or beyond. And I believe that is the last slide, Denise, or next slide, but I believe that's the last slide. So I will turn it back over to you or to Tim.
Well, thank you to Ashley, and thank you to the prior speakers. Denise, do we have any questions from our audience that we might be able to address?
Let's see. I don't see any questions in chat right now, so let me see what I've got. Does anyone in the audience have a question that you'd like to raise your hand and ask in person? Okay, I do have a couple of questions that we were able to collect actually before the webinar. So let's see. How are people going to know the same code location for where they live?
I can take that, Denise. Our WFOs are going to have county-specific maps on their web pages, on their NWR web pages, and there'll be some specific highways and towns that are displayed on those maps. In addition, on the national NWR pages, the county partition descriptions will be provided, so people will be able to see the section of the county using verbiage like northwest or southeast, and then they'll see the very specific area message encoding location code that they would use for their NWR receivers.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Another question is PCA appropriate for one of the counties in your PCA? And what problem are you looking to solve by implementing PCA? And I think that maybe we actually answered those questions in the presentation. So let me see. Here's one. Can you discuss the education and awareness efforts you took for WFO staff, the public, and EAS participants, and education efforts via the SECCs and LECCs and emergency managers? So I think maybe Adrian and Dan, that one's for you.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, pardon me, I was muted. We did a whole lot locally prior to our outreach campaign. We actually created a team locally that helped put together some of these materials and educate the local staff, because we did get a lot of feedback and requests for information from our partners. So I think that mostly answers your question, but yeah, we did a lot of internal training as well prior to the implementation of PCA, so our employees would understand what we were doing as we went forward.
We did a lot with the broadcasters, specifically the station chief operators, which can be the engineers or program directors, who are involved in issuing EAS activations and programming EAS equipment. So there was a learning process, which we did mostly through video conferences, and then contact with, I think it was Wayne Hart, did the contacts with the manufacturers of EAS equipment, so we could specifically tell each broadcaster for your type of equipment, this is how to program in the FIPS codes for the areas which you want to alert and not get stuck alerting for entire areas of Clark County when your coverage is simply the Las Vegas Valley. So it was a two-way street with Dan and I working together to get the information out to the broadcasters as well as the public.
Okay, thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Dan. I do have some more questions that I've got collected before the webinar, but does anyone here have a question that they'd like to ask? And you're welcome to type it in chat and I'll read it, or just unmute and go ahead and ask your question. Yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering how much end-to-end testing has been done, like doing the alert from WarnGen currently and eventually Hazard Services, and then on through NWR waves through to BMH and out the radio.
Yeah, I can answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, when we implemented in June of 2021, we did some extensive testing prior to that. But yeah, we've had success. In fact, I have 7 weather radios sitting on my desk for all of the portions of Clark County, including the entire county. So we've checked the output of it, and of course we went through a whole iterative process about making sure that it was going from AWIPS through from CAVE through NWR waves, and it works with Hazard Services as well, because we're doing Hazard Services obviously for our hydro products, our flash flood warnings, yet it still works for our severe thunderstorm warnings as well. So no, it's been an unmitigated success in that realm here on the technical end.
Yeah, and Jim, just to answer you from our end, we're going towards non-weather emergency messages with Sonoma County here, and we've done testing with Sonoma County on the non-weather emergency message side to get it up. The old HasCollect, right? It kind of got the reboot, and so we get it really cleanly from Sonoma County, going through their IPAWS up through FEMA over to Weather Service and down to us, and it shows up an alert viz in our system. Then we can go to NWR and push it out there. As soon as we have the PCA enacted, it'll go, like as Dan said, it'll just be easy peasy right there.
Okay. Any chance I could see a specimen of a bulletin to see what the headers look like for the partial counties? Is that somewhere out on the PCA website?
Yeah, I'm sure Tim can provide that for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Jim, we'll get that to you.
Okay. Tim, I guess we are just about at time on the nose. So I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of wrap things up.
Sure. So thank you to our talented speakers, and thank you to the contributions of many folks across the NWS who are making this implementation possible. After the webinar, if you have any questions for me or for any of our speakers, we'd be happy to answer them. I know sometimes when the webinar ends, you think of something else. That's really it. We're excited about this long-awaited implementation, again, through the use of the A10 in 2023, and then into deployment with the National AWIPS baseline in calendar year 2024. Thank you, everybody.